Welcome to the Autism Advocate Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Hales. If you're looking for tips on how to advocate for and understand your autistic child in a more meaningful way, you've come to the right place, and we're so happy to have you join us. Hey there, welcome back. We are here with another listener question. This is a bit of a long one, but let's do it. I'm struggling with my 3-year-old starting preschool in our district. The daycare he was in was amazing and communicative, helpful, and included me in his day-to-day with ease. First, pause. Wow. They don't owe you legally any of that communication, so fantastic on them. And play. He transitioned from our state's early intervention program to an inclusion class for preschool that has one paraprofessional, but is not dedicated to him specifically. Okay. There seems to be a wall between the school, which is teacher staff, and I. They will tell me he's doing great, but I feel like things are going over his head. I do see improvement with certain things, but the pace of the class is fast. The teachers barely have time to catch their breath, and my son has a processing delay. By the time he comes home, he is overstimulated and frustrated. Sometimes he's frozen and agitated. Other times he's in overdrive. My goal is to get on the same page, open up fluid communication multiple points in the week because my son requires it to do well. It comes off like they're trying to protect and cover the school via procedures and policies, and I feel extremely defeated. I hear that. People keep telling me to give it time. Nope, big red flag. Not a good one. Anyway, that wasn't from them, that was from me. People keep telling me to give it time, but I can see from certain behaviors at home since beginning preschool, he is struggling. I just can't pinpoint where without their transparent input. Love that. I'm going to read that again. I just can't pinpoint where without their transparent input. Girl, you got this. My son receives speech 2 times weekly and OT once weekly. I'm desperate to fill the gaps and create the village he needs to thrive. I think they're pushing him too hard too fast. I also have proactively begun fulfilling the teacher's wish list so she can teach freely and at her best for all, but also for my son, of course, without worry for supplies and class needs. That's super proactive and a really good way to keep good vibes going between you and the teacher. Great idea. How can I engage with the school or staff better to achieve fluid and transparent communication? And then she prefaced it with, this may seem a bit all over the place. Hope it makes sense. You're awesome, by the way. Oh, thank you for sharing and advocating the way you do. It has helped me tremendously to see even small parts of your journey best. That is so nice. You're so welcome. I'm so glad that these little videos that I do can help anybody. And again, I'm just a mom. Like sometimes when I'm writing my credentials or bio down on something and I'm like, autism advocate, this. But like on paper, my credentials are like, mom. I mean, I do have a college education. It's a music education. Excuse me. I have 2 autistic children that are ages 12 and 6. Most of it is just, I have spent a lot of time proactively learning and pushing and figuring out what works and what doesn't. And that doesn't mean I'm always right. Of course, you can just ask my husband if that's the case. He'll make sure to tell you that no, she's not always right. But the value of the perspective that I have and what I have learned, I hope to pass on to other people. Because again, there just isn't really, we are used to hearing from each individual professional that's involved in your autistic child's community and journey. So that would be a therapist from a speech therapy, perspective, which is great. And we absolutely need their input and their expertise and their education. But again, like for something like food therapy, for example, if they're going to tell me to throw away, any kind of sugar, I'm going to be like, yeah, I hear that. I'm not trying to disagree. I just don't see that working in our family currently, unless we went to some boot camp of some kind or something like that. because for me, as the mom who's looking not just at this one portion from this one perspective, and that's a professional perspective, I'm looking from the overall parental perspective of not just what is literally physically possible, but what's in the best interest of our family, which includes my mental health, my personal capabilities, and same with my husband. It includes my marriage. It includes my husband and I being able to sometime have respite care and be able to have dates with each other. I know, mind blowing. It includes me trying to figure out if I have any interests of myself in myself, because I have honestly lost a large sense of who I am and what my interests might be, because I just don't really have time. And that isn't to say, oh, this is so hard, this parenting journey. It's not a whining thing. It's just if you broke down a clock into its minutes of the day that I have, 97 out of 97% of those 100 minutes are spent in dedication to working on things on behalf of my children. And that's just reality. So yeah, coming from the parental perspective, in consideration of all of this, I'll use the word spectrum, this entire spectrum of things that we need to consider as parents, where we have been talked at by professionals from within their specific fields. It's just a different take, and it's hopefully the take that resonates a little more with you, has just enough understanding and saying, hey, I know what you're going through. I've got your back. You're doing your best. Also, here are some really effective things that have really worked for us and my family. That all had nothing to do with this question. Let me get back to it. I may have to read the whole question again just to get you back on track. I think I can summarize it pretty well. It sounds like, luckily for this parent, their child is transitioning from a specialized, their child is transitioning from what seemed to be a fantastic daycare to, now they're in the public school district, state's early intervention program, to an inclusion class for preschool. There is a paraprofessional in there. So they said that they're looking for, how can I engage with school staff better to achieve fluid and transparent communication? And they articulated a lot of really fantastic things. So what I'd say to this specific parent, and again, this is all my comments are directed to the specific listener or person who wrote me the question. So some of them might not translate to every person's situation, but to this person specifically, I would say you are outrageously well articulated. So I would speak very freely. I would not recommend that for every person, because sometimes I have parents who become very overheated, and so I say, you know what, I want you to really think very precisely about what you want to say, because you kind of let it get away from you. That's not the case for you. You are very articulate, and you're very concise. And I mean, I know it sounds like you're concerned that you're not, but I think you gave just enough information that I could get a really good picture of what's going on. I would ask first for an IEP meeting. And I would, just like anytime you are requesting an IEP meeting, I would make that request in writing, meaning an email. I would email not just the teacher, but also include a member of administration on that email. And honestly, that just the teacher would usually have to receive that email and then forward that on to the administrator, and then forward that on to the case manager. So if you happen to already know who those people are for your child, if you can email them all right away, you're just saving them a step. It's not like you're tattling on your teacher or anything. You're just saving her a step or him a step. I do hear you describing that your son has a processing delay. And you said by the time he comes home, he's overstimulated, frustrated. Sometimes he's frozen and agitated. Other times he's in overdrive. I will say, Like, I know they said people keep telling me to give it time. I will say that depending on the type of child you have, a lot of children do whatever they need to do to get by in school because it's a lot more control that they're needing to exert on themselves and their bodies and their thoughts and forcing themselves to focus, etc. That by the time they come home and they are in a safe space that is familiar, they have their familiar objects and environments and comforting items, and you're a safe person as well, that's when they can kind of shed those expectations and release the whatever has built up during that time. So, for example, if your child has built up stimulation and frustration, then when he got home, he would release that stimulation and frustration. Or so you said sometimes he's frozen and agitated. Maybe he's finally in a place where he can release some of that agitation, or maybe he's been so overstimulated throughout the day, all he can think is to not think at all. And he has that frozen moment. Other times he's in overdrive. So I think by overdrive, maybe you meaning like almost manic, thinking, speaking without thinking, behaving without thinking, outrageous amount of energy, not always connecting the mind to behavior. It's like taking out the executive functioning decision-making part of the brain where they're not deciding what to do and what to say, but it's just sort of happening. I don't know that that's necessarily an awful thing. That's obviously up to you as a parent. It is something that I see very typically. Now, of course, you could be describing something that you're seeing very extreme versions of. So if you're describing overstimulated, frustrated, frozen, agitated, and overdrive as, the extreme versions of these things, then you would be the only person to know that and for you to judge. But I will say kids coming home and having this sort of, it's almost like when adults come home after a long day at work. They need this, calm down time either in the car or maybe they spend quite a long time in the bathroom. Maybe they, watch a little bit of Netflix to come down or listen to a podcast. Sometimes if they've had a really difficult day at work or if they happen to stay home with their family, they may be even more agitated around safe people. In other words, it's not something that's atypical for the general population of people. I will say that it is something that's great to be mindful of, and that you could probably understand quite a bit of how their day was at school based on what they release. And noticing that and being able to address that. It could also probably help you give some hints and guidance to the teachers as to what may be more helpful, because if they're coming home overstimulated or frustrated, then that's been accumulating throughout the day. So if there's something that is really self-regulatory. Now, what's tricky, is that if they're not displaying those behaviors in the classroom, it's not something that can really be addressed in the classroom. Now, they can hear you person to person and, do what they can to help you personally, but they're not legally obligated to help you with anything that's occurring outside of the classroom. I know, bummer, right? And again, that doesn't mean you can't appeal to them as like a person and just say, this is what we're really struggling with. I think this is bad. I think, but they're not legally obligated to help you with any of that within the classroom as far as accommodations or, yeah. The other thing that you mentioned that I wanted to pinpoint comes off like they're trying to protect and cover the school via procedures and policies. Yes. What I would say is while that is very, very frustrating, don't take it personally. And And I don't know that you are. Just be aware that that is per the course. Per the course? I don't know. That's very typical. It's not personal. They're not just out to get you. You may also be dealing with a school that has had issues in the past and have had to cover their behinds before. So they may be extra wanting to follow those procedures. What's great is that you can be like, oh, that's fantastic. Absolutely. Let's follow those procedures, because guess what? If you can show them policies and procedures and laws that are on your side as far as advocating or enforcing, making them do things on behalf of your child, being able to receive a free and appropriate education, then hey. Yeah, I'm so glad that we are all about school procedures and policies, because look at this policy I found. Oh, now obviously don't do it in that snarky way, but that's what I would be doing in my head. Ding, ding, ding. I think they're pushing him too hard, too fast. So, and that was the observation the parent made. Anytime you feel that they are, and they meaning the school, the teachers, the entity, is doing something that's not in your child's best interest, you have to prove it. Now, how could you prove they're pushing him too hard, too fast? You could ask them for, I don't know that you've said that they have an IEP or a 504. You've talked about, they have speech. So depending on your child's IEP 504, your school should be collecting data about the goals that your child has and the accommodations. Is your child progressing in those goals? Is your child regressing or remaining stagnant? Either of those two is not good. Have they increased their negative behaviors within the classroom? Have they, so you need to request the data. And I just did a little video of this, but don't just request their summarization of the data. A lot of times you'll ask to see the data and they'll say, oh yeah, sure. Well, last week, I think he eloped from the class twice. Nope. That's not the kind of data we're looking for. We're not looking for their opinion about the data. We're looking for the notes that they took. That's the data. And because you're a vital member of the team. And if you cannot be a vital member of the team if you are not allowed access to what's happening in the classroom. What's happening in the classroom should be gathered in the data. So if you are not offered the data, it's like when two parties come to court and they have to show each other both the evidence that they have, you know what I mean? Like the attorneys have to share both sides, evidence or evidentiary, this is our pieces of evidence and our exhibits and our whatever. And they get in trouble if they introduce it too late and they don't preview it to the other side so that they can prepare. It's the same thing here. So make sure that whatever opinions you have, which are not invalid, but you can't force them by anything. And especially if you have a school that is very procedural and based on policy, if they like to use those rather than to give your son more of what he needs, if they like to use those to give your son less of what he needs, then guess what? You're gonna do all that footwork for them. You're gonna find all those policies and procedures and laws and within the data that will show them that this is what's needed based on the data. How can I engage with the school and staff better? So like I said, the first thing I would do is request an IEP meeting, and I would request it to as many members of the team in that initial email as you have access to. Whoever responds to you on all of their behalf with dates, I would make sure that they are being specific about the dates. If they call you back, if they respond to your email via a phone call, it didn't happen. So if they respond to your email via a phone call and they're like, we're just really slammed for the holidays. I understand, it's real busy. So I think by like January, we can do that. And, he's pretty okay by now. No. So you can say, oh, I see. Yeah, we're not, that won't be, that's not going to be appropriate for the things that I'd like to discuss and feel I have a right to discuss. If you don't mind, I'd like to continue this conversation via email. I just have a really hard time processing phone calls. So email would be really helpful. I understand that can be an inconvenience, and I really appreciate the extra time and effort you put into emailing me. So surrounded by really kind verbiage, it's totally appropriate to do that. So after you request that meeting in writing, make sure you get a date and a time, and make sure it's not said to you, that it is written down in an email. Once you have that, you should be getting what, would be appropriate is that you would be getting a prior written notice. That's like I think it's 10 days out. They're supposed to get that to you. A lot of times they just have you sign it at the meeting. I am at a place where I generally don't care if they have me sign it at the meeting. Technically, it's not legal. It's not legal procedure. You're supposed to be given at least 10 days notice before the meeting. And that is your way of saying, yes, I received the notice to this meeting 10 days before. And the reason they have that document is to say parents should be allowed an appropriate amount of notice before a meeting happens on behalf of their child so that they can attend that meeting. And they say, we estimate that to be 10 days legally. And I don't remember if it's school days or calendar days. And the 10 days may differ by state. I don't know if other states it happens to be 14, other states it happens to be 5. From what I remember, it's 10. So in other words, if they're like, yeah, we'll have a meeting tomorrow, and you're unable to make it, I really hope it isn't the case, but then they may be able to say, if you are maybe being a quote unquote difficult parent, they may be able to say, well, they refused to attend 90% of the child's meetings. And you can say like, well, I don't remember signing the written notice. I was never given prior written notice, which is your legal right, so that you have an appropriate amount of time to make accommodations and changes in your schedule to attend the meeting. Now, there are some times where that's not their intention. There are some times where like this is an SOS kind of emergency situation that they're trying to address appropriately by having a meeting as soon as they can. In that case, you can waive your right to the 10 days of that prior written notice. And again, that just more presses to the understanding, to the case that not all situations are they're trying to do that to you. But there was enough of that being done that they had to create that legal prior written notice notification situation. So after you get the date in writing, at the meeting, I would have these things written down very specifically with as much evidence as possible. So whatever you could take from their data, whatever data you specifically want to be requesting, whatever things you want to be communicating, very specifically written down. I would also let them know 24 hours beforehand, at least 24 hours beforehand, that you would like to record the meeting, like auditory record the meeting. I don't know if you are doing in-person or virtual meetings right now. Might make it a little more complicated. You still have, most states, you still have a right to record those meetings as long as they're given 24-hour notice. Again, you could say, and for me, this is absolutely true, but it also covers my butt. You can say, I really struggle to understand everything that's being talked about, and the time just flies by. I'm really in the moment, and I want to make sure where I'm signing legal documentation on behalf of my child, that everything I'm signing is exactly what I want to sign. So it really helps me to be able to go back within the meeting and make sure that I understand everything accordingly, which is absolutely, you're right. You never have to sign the IEP if you're not ready to sign it. I will say that though, you want to be not hasty, the wrong word. You want to be, you don't want to delay signing the IEP, because no part of it can be enacted until you have signed it. So there may be services that your child needs and that you agree that they need within that IEP that cannot take place until it's been signed by all parties. So while you want to understand it completely, don't put it off, because whatever was in place previously will stay in place until you have signed the new IEP. It's like you can't just take a car off a lot because you're like, well, I'm gonna buy it. It's like, no, you have to buy it first. But like I said, I would get real specific about what I want. So don't say things like, so you said, how can I engage with the school staff better to achieve fluid and transparent communication? If you simply said, I want to engage with you better to achieve fluid and transparent communication, that's not measurable. You can't hold them accountable to that. It's subjective. So what is fluid and transparent communication? You have to articulate that specifically and written. So you would say, I'm looking to put parent communication into his IEP. I'm pretty sure it can be an accommodation. I'm trying to remember which portion of the IEP parent communication can be put into. But it is a section. It can be added as a section to an IEP. Whatever you feel would be appropriate. So it could be twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. So Tuesdays to say how Tuesday went, Fridays to say how the rest of the week went. I'd like it to include the data that has been collected and the overall teacher's take of the day. I don't know, it's whatever you find helpful and necessary, especially where you're concerned about how they're interacting with you, that it's a lot of policies and procedures that they're putting in your way. I would request the data. The more information you get, the more information you have to use. And again, it's not a phone call. Do not let them give you a phone call. It is a written notice in writing, in email, so that you can have all that data available to you and you can access it how you need to access it. That was a lot. It was very long. I'd say I apologize, but I don't. I'm giving you free advice, so I don't apologize. 27 minutes, holy guacamole. I hope that was helpful. I hope you feel empowered. I know your child is just starting out on this journey and that can be very intimidating and scary. I will say that be persistent, and if you feel like something's not quite fair, the law is probably on your side. It's just about finding what it is. Yeah. Best of luck to you. Your kid's lucky to have you. I hope y'all have a happy Halloween. It's Halloween today, but this episode won't come out until Wednesday, November 2nd. That's bonkers bananas, November 2nd. Having nothing to do with the podcast, if you haven't heard, from now until December 18th, I am gathering sponsors for children at my son's school, Plan B Academy in the Virginia state. That is a school for all autistic children. I'm gathering sponsors for each child to be able to receive an autism acceptance book that I have written and their own drummer plush. Right now, as of Halloween, we have 10 students sponsored. There are 150 students. So just 140 more. That's all. If you want to go follow me on social media, I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I don't have any followers on Twitter. I don't know what I'm doing on Twitter. I don't know how to tweet. I don't like, that's when I realize I'm getting old. I would love to be able to give the gift of acceptance and being seen, and having parents also reading those stories and seeing stories like theirs, stories about families like theirs that are just existing and doing their best and enjoying and struggling and everything in between. Just a bit of sharing, just realness, and realness that reflects a lot of their own experiences too. So if you want to check that out, all of that information is also in the description of the podcast. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Want to submit a question? Email us at theautismadvocatepodcast@gmail.com. Follow our social media outlets and check out our shop featuring my Autism Acceptance Children's Illustrated books and other fun autism acceptance items. Don't forget, I'm rooting for you, and we'll see you next time.